You are listening to the Bravo Creative Podcast, hosted by Tom Baker. Thank you for listening. Your position has been triangulated. Drone army has been dispatched to your location. Commencing attack run in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to the Bravo Creative Podcast, and thank you so very, very much for listening. The Bravo Creative Podcast is available on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. So if you can't find it, try typing the Bravo Creative Podcast in your favorite search engine, and you'll be able to find it, I'm sure. The podcast is also linked directly off the Bravo Creative website at www.bravocreative.net/Bravo Podcast. This week's sponsor is Getting My Butt Kicked on Sato. And I did. My team did. We had a lot of fun, but getting your butt kicked, that's kind of the point of it, I think. And I'm not a person who likes pain, but from my experience in the military and growing up with some pretty rough and tumble guys and gals, I've realized that we learn so much quicker under pain and stress. And not always in a good way, but in the case of Sato, I liken it to that 48-hour boot camp in film production. It's a relatively controlled environment, and the consequence of not doing well or getting it in on time is eating a ton of crow, and I think your soul hurts for a little while. But it's a fun process, and it should be a fun process. And it separates, it decides, it determines, and it prioritizes a lot of the factors in team building and personal growth and just your plain endurance. And I've learned a lot in the 3 years of doing this competition. And my son has learned a lot in doing the competition in the last 2 years. And I think my guest today has learned a few things by doing Sato. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. Speaking of my guest, I recently met him just about a year ago. And he took me on this wild, crazy, fun ride of film production. And once we met, we had an immediate connection. We both served in the military, and we just simply shared a lot of the same struggles in life with work, with family, with our direction. But the one thing my guest really impresses me and inspires me is because he is going down the road less traveled, but he isn't afraid, at least outwardly. He has an unbelievable can-do attitude, and I'm so excited about what he's got on the horizon, and I want to find out more about it. He is the founder, owner, and head cat herder of Sooner Than Later Studios, the tenacious, the talented, and now beardless, which breaks my heart, Brian Scroggs. How you doing, Brian?
I'm good. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, well, I'm at your house.
Fair enough. Thanks for having me on the show.
The cool thing is this is a first for a few things. This is the first time on April 20th that it is literally snowing outside.
Yeah.
In Springfield and much of the state, and it's the first time that I'm actually officially on the road with the podcast, which kind of is fun. I wanted to try this. I wanted to see if the setup would work, and so far so good. So how are things going?
Good. I just also got my butt kicked by Sato, and so I'm having a little trouble getting going today. I'm exhausted. Last night I was falling asleep talking to my wife because I was so tired, but I'm doing great.
So you had a team of about, 6 people, 7 people?
Well, that depends how you define team. We had 5 actors,
right?
Kid actors, and we had a couple of voiceover actors,
mm-hmm.
and then we had a couple of the moms, and then really it was just me and Justice Glover doing all the camera and all the lighting and all the sound. It was pretty crazy.
None of the actors did double duty on any of that stuff?
Not really.
Okay.
They helped move stuff around, but
right.
mainly because we made them, because they're our children.
Oh, yeah.
But no, they were mainly the actors.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, I mean...
Next year, you bring them into the fold and say, hey, you're moving lights.
Without question, that was a number one mistake. So, yeah.
Move the camera over there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It gets hard after a day of just doing it all day long.
Yeah,
everything.
My adrenaline just kept me going. So
yeah.
Justice, I think he's like 20 years old, and I'm over here, I'm getting ready to turn 48. or 49, excuse me. And so he was like, how do you do it? I'm like, well, have kids and you won't be able to slow down. So when you have kids, you'll know how to just keep going.
Well, and honestly, like prior to the podcast, I came over here to Brian's. We started talking. We talked about Sato pretty much the whole time. So we really haven't caught up much. I really don't know what's going on too much with Sooner Than Later. I'm excited to hear. I've heard scatterings and little bits and pieces, but I'm really excited to hear about that. Let's talk about Sato a little bit later, but let's get into Sooner Than Later, because that's something that you have been pretty much just all in on for what, about 9-10 months now?
Yeah, I met Jonna, who's my partner in this endeavor, last February, I believe. So a little over a year we've been kind of working on things, but we didn't really know what we were going to try to do until we started writing and going with The Land of Milk and Honey, which you were a huge part of. So that's been, yes, approximately about 6 to 8 months of just balls to the wall, just trying to get all this stuff done. And anybody that knows Jonna knows that I have to constantly stop her from taking on more projects because she will fill our days with a million things. And so I'm like, let's do one thing good first before we take on too many.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and to kind of go back, so Land of Milk and Honey, I came on about, I want to say it was May.
That's right.
Of last year. And there was a script that you had written, or you had started. Did the kids start that script first?
Yeah, it started as literally a class. My son wanted to be an actor. I got him with Jonna, and she and I started talking and realized that we were two 40-somethings just kind of drifting in the wind, always wanting to be involved higher up in film. We had both done some things in film. And I just thought it was one of those opportunities where maybe there are two people meeting at the right time that can maybe pull something together here and create something. And so we didn't think that way at first. We just thought, let's just do something. I've been really kind of into this concept of the infinite mind. I don't know if you ever read anything about this, but Simon Sinek just came out with this whole idea of this infinite mind concept. And it really is about not having parameters on yourself, not knowing where you're going to go necessarily, just trusting yourself to be able to veer left or veer right.
Sure. Open for opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many times in my life, and I'm sure in people's lives, where there's a fear that takes over and you're trying to figure out where you're going. How am I going to pay my bills, or how am I going to do anything really? And you and I talked about just the difficulties of, growing up the way that we did, or some of the things that we share with our backgrounds. And I think that this concept was more like, let's just start something and see where it goes. And so we started as where the kids just wrote a little script, not even a script, a concept of two kids hunting in the woods. And so they were downstairs in our basement, and Jonna was taking all the kids through, acting exercises, and we were going to shoot just a 2 or 3 minute little thing to kind of show them how to act on film. But then the weirdest thing happened where it's like a therapy session for me, because I started taking it down another path about growing up with a father with post-traumatic stress and just this world of stress and fear that a lot of us go through whenever you have that in your household. And before I knew it, I gave it to Jonna, and she's like, well, this isn't a 2 or 3 minute long film.
Right.
And it's actually pretty good. And whenever you grow up with a low self-esteem, as many of us do out there, I was just like, it is? Well, okay. And she's like, well, let's try to make this. And so that's kind of how I got going.
Yeah, I think that's kind of you just said something that kind of interested me, was that the low self-esteem, I will say this for like being a Gen Xer.
Yeah.
It seemed like a lot of us had low self-esteem. We didn't have necessarily our parents at home cheering us on all the time. But there was some really good results from that. And I've looked at that a lot. I would say probably in my 40s, I've started looking at it a lot and going, man, I have a drive, but my drive is completely different than, someone that might be a little bit younger than me, because I just it was almost like life was a proving ground now.
Yes.
And it was about going out and doing that thing that I thought was impossible in my head and kind of convincing myself that it wasn't. Right.
I think you're onto something in that. For me, Generation X was in between these two bigger generations, right? One is whatever generation you want to put them into when it comes to technology, right? Because our kids these days have access to any knowledge they want to get a hold of.
Oh, yeah.
Right? No matter what. Whereas we did not have that. I remember still ordering the 12 CDs for a penny just to finally hear music. I mean, I remember in college, someone played Pink Floyd for me, and I thought it was a new band. I was like, what is it? I'm from Willard, Missouri. And
right.
I had no access to this information. So I was like, what is that amazing band? And he's like, it's Pink Floyd, you moron. I'm from St. Louis. We actually have music up here. So
yeah, they had KC95 up there. Yeah, they played all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, so I had all these guys, and my nickname in college was just Willard because they thought it was hilarious that I went to a town of 1,100 people and I never heard of Pink Floyd before. And
oh, wow.
It was crazy, right? So we're between this generation where our kids are just so much further advanced with knowledge and maturity than we were because we were kind of not given that information. And this generation of my father, who was raised by the greatest generation in the world, but it's all about rah America and rah family and rah, even though behind the scenes your family could be falling apart.
Oh yeah.
And I think our generation was the first one to be like, hey man, I know you're saying that we have to be a family, but we seem to hate each other sometimes,
right?
Or we seem to be yelling, and no one wants to talk about it,
right?
So you're wondering,
they still don't want to talk about it.
No, they don't. But they wonder why we started getting quiet and going to grunge music and starting to kind of rebel in our own way.
Oh yeah.
If you rebelled outwardly, right, you got smacked.
Right.
So we started rebelling inwardly. And, when music was coming out and they're like, hey, listen, this is bad for you. It's making you violent. We don't want you to play those video games. We're the first generation, I think, to start seeing that coming out and protesting wasn't going to work for us.
I remember I got that, was it NXS?
Yeah.
The album Kick.
Yeah.
And it had the song Devil Inside.
Yes.
And I loved that song. It was like one of my favorites.
Right.
And I remember I was listening to it and my mom came into my room and she was like, what are you doing listening to that?
Right.
And I go, well, Mom, every single one of us got the devil inside. And she was like, you need to turn that off.
Yeah, that is horrible. I remember, this is so prevalent to me, but I remember when NWA came out and we didn't have one black person pretty much in Willard, right? And I was just mesmerized by what they were saying and doing just because they were so rebellious and so angry and so strong. But I remember playing some of their music. I remember playing F the Police, and my mom heard it upstairs and about had a heart attack.
Oh, yeah.
And I never understood this until later, but I think I felt like I connected, I think a lot of us do that are in this generation, with, like in my mind, the black community. It wasn't about them being a black community. It was about the fact that they are bullied, right? They've been bullied is how I looked at it. And I was bullied. So I felt like I was like,
right.
I'm not saying F the police, 'cause I don't know your experience, but I am saying F you dad. And
right.
I'm saying F the military. And I'm saying
right.
F America at times because I'm mad. And I know that I felt very early on that my father had post-traumatic stress. I'm in a violent household. He is forcing me to go a direction I don't want to go. I've got my mom who's full of fear and trying to get me to be a doctor or a lawyer, so I'll just make some money and survive.
Right.
And so I think our generation was raised so much on fear, and the other generations before us were raised on the idea of responsibility. And
well,
so
it was almost like a fear of not succeeding.
Yes.
It's like, and I guess it's more prevalent now, or at least I notice it now. Like, my kids, they go to school, they have, the popular kids, and the popular kids are the ones that play sports and whatnot. And then the also-rans are the ones that aren't like that. But it's the same kind of thing that I grew up with, but when you get older, you realize that it's not really that important, It's like, man, there's a lot other things out there for me to worry about in life than that. But when you're in that moment in your life, it is so important. It is so like everything, but it's that. And I think it was worse, at least I feel it was worse whenever I was a kid than what it is now. Now they have a lot of things like, no bullying and things like, we didn't have that stuff.
Absolutely not.
Like our kids today, they had a track meet that was supposed to be today and it got canceled. And I'm like, we would have still ran in this today.
100%.
And so, and maybe our world has moved on from having to deal with hardships like that, or where we have to compete in environments like that. But I think there is a little bit of a downside, and we're going to suffer from it. Thank God for like things like Sato that make you have to really endure, because there is no second place or third place, or you don't get an award for competing. You get an award if you make a good film in 48 hours and people like it, but you don't get it for, if your film sucks, people are going to pat you on the back, hey, good job. But there is still a hardship built into it.
But don't you think we put that on ourselves to some degree? Like,
oh yeah, I definitely do. Yeah, definitely.
I was listening to a sports thing today on the radio, and this was I think an interesting idea that plays right into this, and that is, they were debating in baseball that they didn't know this, and they've been in sports forever. He did not realize that both the National League and the American League each got a ring for winning their division, even though they lost the World Series, right?
Right.
And they were debating on whether that was a positive. And I felt like immediately I thought, my God, this is what my father used to preach. There's only one winner. And I remember thinking even early on, that can't be true. So all of us are losers. Only one person can win. And then I realized you have to redefine what your goals are. You have to redefine what winning is. And I think that's the issue. I thought, well, why shouldn't they celebrate? They did win something.
Well, if more to your point, if the American League as a whole feels that we should give the guys that went to the World Series a ring because you beat everybody in our league,
right?
More power to you,
right?
But I think it should be. I liken it to deer hunting. This will take us back into Land of Milk and Honey. A few years ago, they put a point restriction on deer on where I hunt.
Okay.
Because they wanted more trophy bucks, right?
Sure.
For me, getting a deer is a trophy.
Right.
I have a lower standard than the average person does, but I hunt a lot differently. I don't hunt at the edge of a cornfield in a stand. I go out and hunt off of a trail that I think deer are running on. So me getting one is a prize.
Now, just so you know, I have an image in my head of you just having a spear and stuff on your face, like just painted face, and you just running out there like a banshee, being like, this is how you really hunt.
A lot of the guys that I hunt with, they're very much purist. Okay. And I just started out hunting with them, and they were all like, I remember the first time I let it was a decent sized buck go past me, and I let the buck go past me, and they were like, they asked me, did you see anything when I got back? And I said, yeah, I saw like a little 6-pointer or whatever. And they go, you didn't shoot it? I was like, no. And they go, well, what are you out here hunting for then? And I was like, what do you mean? And they go, were you hunting for horns? You hunting for meat? And I was like, I guess horns. They go, you need to start hunting for meat because we all share the meat here. And so it became what our hunting, and that shaped me and formed me and changed my mind on things, was that you make it what you want it to be. Yes. So, coming home at the end of deer season after I've spent 3 weeks out hunting, coming home with meat is the trophy.
Sure.
And so, more to kind of what you're saying is I think we have to individually build in what our goal and what our hope is for whatever process we're going down. It's like, with Sato for me was, I want to have a film that people will enjoy.
Right.
I don't care about winning awards. That's nice, but I want to have a film that when people watch it, they go, oh, I know where they got that from. That was a funny little,
So it's so funny about that. And this is what I think Sato, I know you want to talk about that later on, but it plays into my belief system when it comes to what we're talking about. And that is, I believe most people are better when they don't have an idea of how to get where they're going, they allow information to come to them and then they move in that direction, right? And so typically I believe my success has been whenever I play in that world. But we all fall back into this finite idea, especially our generation. I think we struggle with this because we believe what our parents told us to be a bunch of hooey. However, we can't help ourselves but to be like, maybe they were right. Or
it's programmed.
It's programmed in, right? And so...
And we know that from the military.
We do.
Because we saw how that happened.
In fact, I remember wishing I hadn't have been, it's going to sound so arrogant, but I don't mean for it to be, as deep as I was. I was a deep thinker, even at a young age, because I went into the military, and the moment they came out and started screaming at me, I was like, you're just trying to manipulate me and you're going to control me. And before I knew it, 30 days later, I'm like, yes, sir, no, sir. And I love the Marines. And I mean, I went in and people were like, how are you a Marine? I'm like, I don't know. This is so dumb. I don't know why I'm doing it. I came out and be like, woo, all right. I mean, they do program you. And I think that we are easily programmed to follow a certain path because we want to believe in success, right? But when I was with the kids doing Sado, I had a whole idea in my head how we're going to be successful. But then, this is so funny, Jonna was jarring at me a little bit about she and you talking about it and making some jokes about like, I won't be, Brian has no idea how tough this is. And I was like, oh, Tom and Jonna, you'll see. When I win an Oscar for this film, and you guys, you won an Oscar for something you did in 48 hours? Yeah, I did, guys. So we did this here, and I thought it was so smart. I was like, I'm going to have it right in my house so I have a controlled environment, one room for lighting, one room for sound. It's going to be amazing, and Tom and Jonna are going to eat their words. And then I realized that the one complication that I did not get out of my head was me. I literally overcomplicated the script.
Right.
Then I wrote a script that was way too long, and I didn't know how to edit on Final Cut. I didn't know how to use the camera. And all of a sudden I was like, what am I doing? And at one point I didn't even have justice. I was going to do it on my own like a moron. So as we were going through it, I was like, I found myself falling back into this belief that I had given myself that I'm going to win an Oscar and prove you guys wrong. And then when I'm like literally almost in tears trying to just get into the computer and please upload, I realized the success here isn't making an Oscar nominated film. The success is what you learn from it and how it makes you better and how you have camaraderie. I mean, this sounds cheesy, Tom, but when you called me yesterday, and I'm assuming Jonna must have given you a call and said Brian was in tears last night because he didn't make the first cuts, which I was, because you're exhausted. I felt so bad for the kids. I'm like, I can't believe it. I thought for sure I was going to win an Oscar.
She didn't call me. I called Jonna. I forget what it was about. Oh, it is a separate issue. Okay. We were talking about this, and I just asked. I said, "Hey, how did Brian do? How did everything go?"
He called me crying.
Yeah.
So
I cried my first year too.
Did you really?
Yeah, I cried like a baby. Yeah.
Well, what was amazing to me was, and what I forgot,
because of the letdown. It was because I knew I was going to let my team down.
That's what I felt like, right?
Yeah.
This huge responsibility that when you grew up in a military family, I'm just telling you, and maybe everybody goes through it. I'm just bringing the military into it because of my experience, but I think our generation, our families, our parents' generation was very critical of us. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I had this critical voice in my head, and I literally thought that all the moms are going to hate me and be mad at me because their kids put so much time into this. And look what you did, Brian. You
They're all laughing at you.
Exactly. Right. But what was weird was I forget what I have been missing all these years by going into the wrong field, not following my dreams, not, falling into the trap of chasing down money versus chasing down what I love. And that is the camaraderie you have with people that care about the same things that you do, right? Finding your tribe.
Sure.
When you called me and offered to help with editing because you knew Final Cut, and you gave me that one little tip to go in the proxy file so my computer would stop crashing.
Oh, yeah.
I almost literally started crying, not because I could get it done, but because I just think I forgot how much of a community you can be part of.
Oh, sure.
And so it just felt good to have somebody out of the blue call me and say, hey, man, let me just give you a couple tips so you can at least stop banging your head against the wall. And I think that's what I missed.
Well, because it sucks.
It does.
And it takes sometimes it's just one little piece. And that's one thing I've always talked about on this podcast is that asking for help is so very important, because those people out there in our life, they're willing to give us that help. They do it because it makes them feel good too, to be able to help. And, you know, like for me, I've been doing Final Cut for a decade.
Right.
I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah.
I guess I would be an expert on it if I've been doing it for a decade, right?
Absolutely.
But there's still things that I learn about, you know, editing and things like that. But the nice thing is that hopefully after you get like some of those little pieces, then all of a sudden it starts to become an enjoyable process, and it really does become a tool in order for you to create. And it no longer becomes that thing you have to learn or to overcome to be able to create something.
That's a really good way of saying it. I think the frustrations everybody has in life is you want to be successful in whatever field you want to be in. And when you're a parent as well, you can really see it in your children, because they have so many things they don't know how to do, but their patience level is so low. Like they expect to be great at whatever they do.
Like right now.
Yeah. Right now. Like, why can't I do this right now? Well, you've never done it before. But yet I'm up in my office. My wife thinks I'm crazy because I'm yelling at the computer. I'm like talking to it like it's a human being. I'm like, why won't you just do this for me, please? And I'm like, Justice is behind me trying to help me, and he's trying to give me some advice. And I'm like, shut up, leave me alone. I got to concentrate. I'm freaking out. And really what's funny about it is, why would I think that I'm going to open up this program 2 days before I start and look at it and then be an expert at it and be awesome at it?
Right.
So you have to change your priorities. And I would also say what you said in the beginning is true. I learned more from these 2 days in filmmaking for where I am in my journey here than I've learned so far doing anything.
Well, and I think you'll learn more if there's one simple act you have to do before you do Sado. And if you do this, and I only know this like after like the first year, because I really, really got my bell rung. I mean, got it rung. Now, I turned it in on time, but I got my bell rung. But what I realized was the essence of Sado is to be humble.
Yes.
And if you're humble, then you will grab those lessons that are kind of present those happy accidents. And I think that this kind of comes full circle in that infinite life that we have.
Right.
Because if you have that infinite life, as long as you're humble throughout that process,
then you can maneuver.
And you can see opportunities, and you can see what people you need to bring into the fold with you to accomplish that, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Sado. If you're humble and know, I don't know everything, and there's going to be, but the things that do come up, I know that just with some hard work and ingenuity, I can get it figured out. Like, so we did all of our own music for Sado.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I literally had a guitar, and we used some of the elements from the film, and we just banged them together, or we just did like, and it turned out kind of cool. And I was happy with it in the end. And I was like, not too bad for a schloob that doesn't know how to make music, you know?
That's my point, though, is that it's like Plato's cave. The idea is that you don't know what you don't know until you know it, right?
Right.
So you can't make a song if you don't ever pick up an instrument, right? And so that's what I thought was fun about it. And I think even better is that I'm doing this with my son. My other son is working on the poster for us. And just to be able to be part of that with them. I watched the video your son had done a couple years ago or last year.
Yeah, last year.
And it's not that, it doesn't matter if it's great or not great. What's awesome is to have the gumption to go try it. And I want my kids to see me on the ground working my ass off, let them know that it is.
I'm going there.
Yes.
And you can go there too.
You can too.
Yeah,
Take risks and try things out and see where you go.
I think that's another side effect of that Gen X generation is because we grew up with parents telling us this is how you should do it, but I didn't necessarily always see my parents doing that. And then as I got older, I was like, well, you know, they told me that this is how to do that, but I'm doing it right now, and that is nothing like what they told me, you know? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, they snowed me.
Yeah. I oftentimes think, though, I don't know about you, but I'm always going back in my memory bank and trying to figure out where my parents were. Like, I have a very strong memory of them just being really critical and difficult. But I also have memories of like them never being around. So I think that generation may have been trying to escape or go their own direction or whatever they were doing. But I didn't get a chance to watch them do things. What I would watch is my dad would ask me to move a table, and then he would scream at me whenever he wanted to take a rectangle table through a square hole.
Right.
And I'm like, well, if you just turn it, shut up and just do it my way. And you're like, oh. So I think that
it's kind of an analogy of life sometimes, right?
Right. It's so true.
Try to fit something into some place that just doesn't fit.
Yeah.
There's one thing I've always, and I have to cross-check myself as I've gotten older, is that
we all do.
I hate to armchair quarterback my parents at this stage, because I realized that I was like 27, 28 years old before I got married. And then I was 33 years old before my son was born. My parents were 22.
Right.
When they had me. 22, 23,
so
I think.
Right.
And I look back to when I was 22.
I was an idiot.
I was an idiot then.
How would I have raised a child?
I was an idiot at 27.
Exactly.
And I was really an idiot at about 30. And so then I sit there and look at like my parents. I was already 9, 10 years old by the time they were.
Right.
And so there is a difference. And I don't know whether that's right or wrong. I have often said that I shouldn't have gone into the military at the age that I did, because I wasn't mature enough for what was coming at me.
Sure.
And what I was going to have to deal with.
Sure.
And I had some friends that went into the military when they were, probably in their early 20s. And they had a lot, I won't say better, but they had they could cope with that portion of their life a little bit better.
How old were you whenever you went in?
I was 18. I went in right after high school.
See, I went in at 21. I was failing out of college because I had no direction. I had no understanding what I wanted to do.
Right.
I was wanting to be going to film school, but I was trying to get at the University of Missouri to create a film class. So I was trying to get them to create a film degree for me. And when they couldn't do it, there wasn't enough classes there. I got really depressed. And so all of a sudden I'm laying in bed. I can't get out of bed. I can't do anything. And I'm like, I'm going to join the Marine Corps. But you are right. It was pretty much saved my life, because I was like literally like I couldn't get out of bed. Depression was like a real thing in my family, and I was like, oh my God, I'm like my grandfather, and it was crazy. And what was bad about it was, and this is I think tells you a lot about whenever you have a really tight family. If you know me at all, there's not a single one of my friends that would ever be like, oh, that makes sense, Brian, you should go to the Marine Corps. Nope. My mom and dad were like, thank God, just go do something. You're failing out of college, just join. And that
was your dad in the Marine Corps?
Yeah, he was.
So was that a subconscious of
I think so.
Kind of a reset for you?
Yeah, there were a couple things that I think happened to me because I was older and I was already really kind of getting into writing. I had been writing a journal and really trying to delve into the psychological dilemma that had been going on. Just to give a kind of quick backstory, was my father, because of his pride, because post-traumatic stress was never discussed, which I do think is a lot harder for kids to deal with, because you deal with this something that's unnamed, right? All I know is that my father seems like a sweet person, but at any moment he'll fly off the handle and scare the hell out of you. And then you're hiding in your room playing Star Wars people, making up new stories, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what my path was. And so when I was thinking about going to the Marine Corps, my mom and dad were like, go do it, man. That's going to be so good for you. And I look back and I think, really, if fear wasn't running your life, or if you were closer to me in your own way, you would have said, hey, let's figure out another way for you, right?
Right.
But when I joined the Marines, it probably was the first start of my healing, because I understood my father. Because of my creative mind, I was able to be under barbed wire with not real grenades going off and imagining what my father must have been going through during Vietnam.
Sure.
And I was able to connect a little better, because I'm such a jerk. I used to come home to fight with my dad from college. I'd be like, hey man, Vietnam was a political war, and what you guys went through wasn't even something you should have been doing. And I tried to say every horrible thing.
Right. To get a rise out of him.
Just to get a rise out of him, because I was mad. I was angry.
Kind of pay him back.
Right. And I started to connect with at least the thought process of a soldier's mentality, the thought process of my father, who grew up very poor in a very violent, drunken household. It was his way out. He was 17, just turning 18 when he went in. Can you imagine? I mean, you did it. I mean, 18 years old to go over to a Vietnam during that time of
I can't imagine.
Oh, my Lord. I think it's just unimaginable.
And I was in a fairly controlled environment. I mean, I was on an aircraft carrier, which is probably one of the most dangerous places you can live. And I cannot think of anything worse other than a submarine. Yeah, there was always something going on.
Sure.
And I think that's where my heightened sense of awareness came from, is because at any time there was a bomb moving this way, or there was, it's a jet coming, and it was always something. But there's a good and there's a bad to it.
Sure.
I'm a firm believer that we make of it what we want to make of it.
Sure, absolutely.
You can look at a situation and go, this is the most horrible thing. But then I also look at it and go, I'm pretty happy with the arc of life that I've gotten to. And I'm okay with it. I'm at peace with it. I better be at peace with it at the age of, 47. Oh yeah. Brian he has a beautiful house, and he lives right by the train tracks.
Yeah.
You guys are probably used to it by now, though, aren't you?
Yeah, but you always hear Penny and I, every time a train goes by, you'll hear us just scream in one of the rooms, I hate this train. Why does it have to keep coming through? There's no schedule for it, so we never know when it's going to come by.
Really?
Yeah. So.
Well, enjoy the sounds of the train.
Yeah.
Brian and Penny, they have to enjoy it every day.
Every day.
You only have to enjoy it for one day.
So we were I was thinking about that too, about when this is an amazing thing to me in my mind, is that I go to the Marine Corps, and during the Marines, or boot camp, I start at least connecting with what my father must have gone through in his generation, and what they had to do. I just can't imagine it. But my anger started to subside a little bit, right? And so I started trying to understand what my feelings were. And what happened was it transferred into my anger towards America, towards the government, towards the idea that we shouldn't throw our children at 18 years old to fight these battles that they're not psychologically prepared to handle. And so then I just went through a whole rebellious period in my 20s where I would just fight things to fight things. And my friends never understood why I'd be so angry whenever I would react to things, but they always loved getting a rise out of me because you just never knew what I would say or do. But I had no fear because I'm ignorant, because I'm in my 20s and no understanding of what's going to happen to you. But what that does translate to, I think, is if you can get control of this attitude. I remember in my 30s making my first movie. It was terrible. It was way something I really wanted to. It was a full-on feature with 4 guys. And I literally got the entire town of Columbia to open up all these different bars, let me shoot there, and I got the University of Missouri to work with me, and it was really an amazing thing. It was terrible. It was shot on 4 different types of cameras that was just gathering from people. Terrible sound, but the gumption, the chutzpah that was drilled inside of me because of my father and this need to be goal-oriented and get up every morning and go out and fight and do something. I think that I was finally able to start putting that into a concept of something I wanted to do, right? And so people would see this production and they couldn't believe I pulled this off. I had 100 extras coming in and no money to do it. That's why I also failed, because I had no money to actually hire good people, right? But
what was the movie?
It was called Searching for Normal. Okay. And it was about 4 guys in their 30s. That's where I was in my 30s, who were just now coming of age. It's called Searching for Normal, coming of age. It said, coming of age can come at any age. And so the idea was that they're kind of growing up and one has a family and they're trying to figure out who they are in life. And so, it was like guerrilla filmmaking to the point that we were filming one kid getting beat up in a parking lot. I just took a crew there to a parking lot. I didn't tell the cops or the city. And the cops thought we were actually having a fight in there. And 2 cop cars pulled up, drew their guns on us. We had to drop to the ground. I was like, we're just filming. And they did not buy it at first. It was crazy.
Did you get all that on film?
Oh, yeah. It was crazy. I see the film drop to the parking lot, and then you can see the foot of a police officer and just hear her just screaming at me with her gun drawn.
Really?
Yeah, I was a little nervous on that one. But then...
so what year was that?
That was in 2003.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But what was cool about it, and this is what I think is great about life, and that's why meeting Jonna was so great, and we never really talked about what I'm doing right now, but That's because you and I could probably sit around and talk about the
Oh
past.
yeah, we can talk this all day.
But I think it's amazing because once I did that film on my own, just went out and made it, as dumb as it was to make a full-length feature with no money, to bring in that many people. One of my characters was a singer, and I brought in a whole like stage and hundreds of people to come in, and here's my solution. To get all the extras, I just bought a bunch of kegs and told them it was free beer, not realizing that after about an hour, you cannot control the crowd. And so we just tried to make it work and be like, oh, they're rowdy. Just keep shooting. It'll be.
Just get some footage of it. Yeah.
It was so dumb. But after that, I met a guy who said, well, let's do a film festival here. So then we created the first film festival in Columbia. And I had over 100 films and all these bands come in. Also a massive failure because I thought too big. I thought I'm going to get 20 different venues. Well, yeah, 20 venues with 20 people in it each wasn't very cool. If I had 5 venues and everybody had to go into those 5 areas, it would have looked amazing, right? But
perception is reality.
Oh, it's so true. But what happened was I got a call from a production. It was a $3 million movie being made near Columbia, and they heard I was the film guy around there.
Wait, don't tell me. Was it Bottleneck?
He was Bottleneck.
Was it Bottleneck? Okay.
Yeah.
I remember that. We had a lot of our crew from Jeff City. Yeah. Because I was doing stage shows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We had a lot of our crew from Jeff City. I think Don Otto.
Yeah.
Don Otto. Actually, just
so weird.
My last show was Don Otto was in my last show with me.
Wow.
But I remember a lot of those, like what you're talking about. I was strictly stage at the time, so I wasn't like, I'm not gonna go do no stupid movie. I don't want to do that. But
no, it was an amazing experience for me because when you are, I at least had a very low self-esteem and always wanted to be in film, and I was starting to go down this road, but I was still nervous about who am I and can I really do this and can I make money at it and all the things you think about when you're in your 30s and you're supposed to be growing up, whatever that means. Right?
Because we're supposed to make money at what we do,
supposed to make money, right? And so I came down to work for them, and one thing I learned very quickly, this is so shocking to me, but if you just work hard in anything you do, most people at various times in their lives don't. And so you can rise pretty fast. And they just kept moving me up. And I was part of the union and they were just like throwing me more things. And I was like, oh, this is so much fun. But I was too young and dumb to realize that I was meeting all these people that had gone on to do have worked on some of the greatest films out there that were working on this movie with me. And I had no idea. And so I didn't really connect with them the way that I probably should have, right? Except for one guy. His guy was named Jason Clark. He was a producer on the film. He wasn't there for the first week while we were getting set up. And when he showed up, he was like a completely horrible jerk at first. Like he comes in and just lays down the law and everyone's like, oh my God, the producer's here. And, didn't really understand the dynamics of how a film set works. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, I can tell he's the guy in charge. And one day he invites me to go to a Willie Nelson concert. And he and I and the other producer go to the Willie Nelson concert and hang out afterwards. And he goes, so Brian, you seem like you have your act together and you seem like you want to be in film. Maybe you can come work for me in LA. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And he says, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be a producer like you. And he goes, oh, no, you'll never make it as a producer right now. You're terrible at what you do. I go, well, what? He goes, you'd be a great assistant. Well, I'm like, oh, no, I'll be a producer. And he goes, well, here's the thing you don't have. You don't know how to sell. I could tell you have a low self-esteem. You're afraid to ask people for almost anything. I said, well, I went and got a movie put together. I made a film festival. And he goes, that's easy. Can you walk into somebody's house and ask them for $100,000? And at the time, $100,000, are you kidding me? That sounds like when you're 30 years old and you've never made more than minimum wage.
Right.
I was like, yeah, no, I cannot do that. And so he said, go get a job in the car business and just learn how to sell cars. And that sounded awful to me. I was like, that sounds terrible. He goes, yeah, go learn how to sell cars and then give me a call. And so Jason has gone on to make movies like Ted and Orville, the TV show.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He's gone on to do some great, great things. But, this is exactly the problem with people not chasing their dreams at the right times, right? Penny and I were ready to get married and start a family. And he's like, you can come out to LA and you can work for me, but you'll make, nothing basically. And I'd already lived in LA for a little while. So I knew that the place I could actually rent would be about the size of this table, right?
Right.
And so we're like, God, if we want to have kids, like, how are we going to do this? I mean, I didn't trust the fact that I would just move up, that I would excel. So in my mind, he's inviting me out as an assistant. And that's something that I look back on and regret, because Penny and I would have been fine. We would have made it, and I would have grown because I would have learned.
So is that a regret then?
Oh, it's a huge regret.
Really?
I mean, you can never, I think, once you have kids especially, regret too much, because you don't want to make any changes to your past that would negate your kids.
That would sound kind of bad.
That doesn't sound like you're a good person at all. I mean, I guess I love them, but I mean, it's just, that's really the reality. But I only regret it, Tom, because I think that it says a lot. I was willing to make my own film or do my own festival if I'm in charge of it and can control my outcome in my mind.
Right.
You can't, but you think you can. To go work for somebody else and learn gave me this feeling like my father was coming down on me, or I was going to always be held back. And ironically, for the next 10 years of my life, 12 years of my life, I did very well in business, but I always, in the beginning, worked for really strong, mean men that screamed at me. And my wife one day said, "Do you find it weird that you keep working for people like your father?" And I was like, oh my God, like, you don't realize it. But my point of saying that is I got away from film. Here I had this momentum going. I meet this guy who's obviously done well for himself. I could have gone out there and who knows where I would have been, but instead I went a different path.
Sure.
So now when I met Jonna, I was like, you know what? I think life just keeps throwing me opportunities, and it's my job to take them when they come. And so that's kind of how we got the whole thing started with the company. And
so talk to me a little bit about, like, just give me the elevator speech of what is Sooner Than Later Studios. Or have you written it yet?
Oh yeah, no, I've done all the work on that part of it. So Sooner Than Later, the reason we came up with that title was because Jonna really had that term down, because I would wait on some things because I like to take my time and figure out, what the best way to do it is. And my way isn't the best way.
Premeditated.
I like to premeditate it, right? I'm very organized, and I want to make sure I know how we're going to be successful. John, on the other hand, she's the opposite way of me, right? She just goes. And neither of those ways really work, because one means you
Ready,
never...
fire, aim.
Yes. She wore me out on this film, man. And so working with her every day, there's a few things I think that people always need to keep in mind when it comes to working with partners. Well, one, the older you are, the more you're set in your ways and the more trust factors you have, right? So you got to find your way to trust each other. But sooner than later became this idea where John and I are going to come together in our 40s. We have not gone down the path we want to go down. We've been sidetracked for various reasons, as many of us out there are. And the idea is that you can do whatever you want to, and you should do it sooner rather than later. And that just kind of has propelled me into every decision that I'm making. I'm just trying to decide, is this truly the path that I want to go on? And then I just want to go. I don't want to sit around anymore and debate whether I can be successful or not. I think anyone can be successful at something they love. And so that's the elevator pitch version of what I'm doing. And that's why Sato kind of played into it. And we just kind of were like, one of the moms, texted me and said, "You should do Sato." And I was like, oh, that scares the hell out of me, right? And Brian, 15 years ago, I probably wouldn't have done it. And this time I was like, I'll figure it out. And that's what I loved about even failing, was I figured out enough to grow and to do the next thing. And so that's what John and I are trying to do. We're just trying to take our ideas and turn them into fruition, and just trust that we are smart and capable, and we will find our way to whatever that success is. I just don't want to define success as money anymore. I don't want to define it as...
But that's okay if it does.
No, I hope it does. Please. If anybody's listening out there, they want to send money our way, that's awesome. I just don't think that's success. I think that's one version of success. But if it becomes your only idea, I think it does stop people in their 40s from stopping what they're doing and then just going on another path. I think it's very scary, right?
Oh, yeah.
But some of the best success stories are people that got fired from a job or lost something and they had to go recreate. I mean, COVID is the best example of that. How many companies are going to come up out of this that would never have been thought out before because people were just kind of set in their ways and it was working fine.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I mean, my podcast started because of it, because honestly, I had more time. And actually you and I had a conversation one day. I don't know if you remember this conversation. You were sitting on the front porch, which where we're at right now is where we filmed Land of Milk and Honey, was at your house. And, so it was actually kind of nice walking out on your front porch. It was a little bit like of a walk down memory lane, but we were kind of sitting there. There was a little bit of a lull in production, and we were just kind of standing there, and we got to talking about how noisy life had become.
Yes, I remember this.
And trying to find our happy place.
Right.
Our fortress of solitude, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And that's resonated with me ever since that day that we talked about that. It was, and I think this is something that, I think this is why film is fun for me, is because there are those special films out there that you see that you go, oh, I get exactly what that person's thinking. And it gives you that kind of undeclared tribe out there. And you find out that somebody else that's pretty close to the same age is going through the same thing. And you're like, I'm not alone. And I can get through this, or I do have someone that I can talk to and I can see how they're doing it, as long as I humble myself.
Right.
But I think those are our little blessings in life that we get now. And I think we have a tendency to kind of latch onto those more so than, I think when we were in our 20s, that stuff probably happened.
Oh, sure.
But we were too busy doing something else to even pay attention to it.
Yeah. I also don't think you have as many fears because you have less responsibilities. Right. I remember that conversation too. And I told my wife about it immediately afterwards. I was like, this is so weird. I go, Tom and I have so much in common from our experiences and just from our background with our families and the military. But what I find to be interesting is that all the guys I grew up with, right, we all have similar experiences. Most of us that are in this generation grew up in areas where you knew a lot of the people that you went to school with. Not people didn't move near as much as they do now.
Right.
High school and all these schools are transient. Your kids can move around and change schools and do whatever they want to do. We didn't, right? We stuck in one place a lot of times, and you just kind of knew the people you knew forever. I still have some of my best friends are still my high school buddies that I grew up with. But one thing that draws all of us together is that all of us, no matter where you come from, when you're in your 40s or your 30s, when you take on responsibilities, they feel way heavier. And while you're moving forward, you don't think about how much your mortgage is necessarily, or how much this costs, or how much money you're doing per month, until all of a sudden you're not making as much money as you were. I don't care how much money you make. If you're spending more than you're making,
right,
that's a lot of stress, right?
Yeah.
But it stops all of us from putting on the brakes and going after what we want. In fact, I found that I usually put the gas on more, thinking I'll overcome this just by doing more, right? I had a massive failure in business.
I do the same exact thing.
Do you? Yeah.
Yeah, I do the same exact thing. Like, I'm like, all right, if I apply that much pressure, then I know that I am going to counteract it with activity.
Yes.
But I'm not 100% sure about that anymore.
I am not either. I'm not either. It's a feeling. When I played basketball in high school, I would be just good enough to get all conference honors, but not good enough to be, to go higher and be state. My dad had this idea that, oh, look, you're a great basketball player. Well, yeah, for Willard, Missouri, and this small little town, I'm a pretty good ball player, but I wasn't even that talented. I was just so angry that I have memories of guys diving for a ball, and we're both going for the ball. I'm usually going to win this battle because I hate everyone at 16, and I hate my father, and I'm ready to. I'm going crazy, right? But I would have this moment. I'd wait for them to hit the ground first, and I would just jump on them. And I'm not kidding you. My senior year, I made the front page of the Springfield News Leader sports section like 5 or 6 times because I was always in a scuffle or always doing whatever, right? So I only know struggle with anger and with tension and with doing things and with pounding my head against the wall. And so I agree with you. I don't think it's true anymore. I think that most of that is wasted effort, and all you're doing is getting a headache. I think if you're just calm and smart and not moving so fast that you forget the path you want to be on, you have a better chance of being successful and not feeling the pain. But doesn't it feel to you like a void whenever you're not that way. I don't know if you feel that way, but I do. I feel like I'm not being successful. I'm not going to win. If I'm not angry.
That has been. You were talking about the benefit of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Right. And I haven't quite been able to quantify all of it yet. I mean, there's been a lot of things that happened in this span of a year that I never would have thought ever. Like in the last decade of being a videographer and having a successful commercial, business where I could do this, the thing that I love. I never in a million years thought that the experiences that I experienced over the last year that I was going to ever experience them. They just seem so foreign to me. Yesterday, so weird. Of course, yesterday it was 70 degrees outside.
Right, now it's snowing out.
And I'm unloading all my gear from Sato. My truck was just loaded with every piece of tech and gear that I had. And I unloaded it out of the truck. And my guitar was sitting in the back seat. And I thought, I'm just going to sit down. I mean, now I live out on 10 acres. So I'm like, I'm going to sit out. There's only a bunch of cows in the backfield. So I'm just going to sing them some songs.
Right.
And I sat on the back of my tailgate of my truck. This sounds so country, me talking about it.
No, it sounds awesome, actually.
But I sat in the back tailgate of my truck and I sat and played through like 5 or 6 songs. I even wrote like the beginning of a song, and I thought, this is what I want to do with my life.
Sure.
I love having these moments.
Right.
And I didn't have any of those in the last decade. And I didn't have them with my kids, and I didn't have them with my friends, and I didn't have them with my spouse, and I didn't have them with just life in general because I was going all the time, it seemed like.
Right. That is the key, I think, to me is, ironically, I don't know that I would have made the land of milk and honey had it not been for the pandemic in a weird way, right? Because I had just come off a spectacular crashing of my business that I thought I was so great at. And I was just like what you said before. I wasn't humble. I didn't go out and get help. I thought I could just overcome it by just doing more, right? So I have a major crash. I'm losing the business. And the pandemic hits. And I start thinking, well, what else am I going to do? I don't know what else to do right now. And I meet Jonna. And so because of this, the whole world slowed down. All the things that I needed to do just kind of didn't matter as much. Everybody was like, yeah, pay your bills, don't pay your bills. We'll give you some breaks, or do this and do that. We'll give you some breaks. And it literally allowed me to stop for a minute and go, well, let's just see if we can do this.
You kind of do a...
Yes. Yes. But I remember when you guys were all around here, I had a breakdown. I mean, people have not seen the film yet, but when everybody sees the film, when you see Tom in this thing, I mean, literally like talking about it almost like it makes me cry, because I was watching you do these things and it was taking me back to my childhood. And I remember looking around going, man, this is so inspirational to me, because for the first time in my life at 47, no, I keep changing my age, 48 years old, I'm finally doing what I really want to do. And I'm doing it telling the story about my childhood. And it was therapeutic, but it was just so ironic because the people that I'm putting on screen here are the people that were kind of telling me, don't chase your dream of doing filmmaking because, you can't make money at it. And then last year during the pandemic, my mom died of cancer. She had another issue going on, but she had to die by herself basically because of COVID. And she's the one that gave me some extra money so I could go out and make my film. And for the first time ever, she said, I want you to go chase your dream. And I'll probably tear up at this, but it was just like, I just made this film based on money my mom gave me, who went through all of this with me. And my father gave me the blessing, and he's gone through and got help for post-traumatic stress. And he's very well aware of it now. I'm sitting in my house, looking around. This is, my area. And I'm so proud that all these people are around. And what ends up happening is, I think once you start putting something in motion, before you know it, it's just there. When you stop worrying about where it's going to go, when you just start just doing it. And so I'm hoping that sooner than later for John and I just turn into doing multiple things that I hope will inspire people more than anything else to not be afraid and go do it themselves, because I think fear is so prevalent. And so there's a picture of me. Actually, it's in one of our behind the scenes. So we have the movie coming out soon, and then we have a behind the scenes kind of a docuseries that's going to kind of show what we went through. And there's a scene of me just bawling, and my wife is like hugging me after you just had a major scene in the kitchen and watching you, erupt in these emotions.
That scene literally brings me to tears just thinking about it, because it was such a, and here's a blessing. The blessing is that we didn't film it on the first day because
we weren't there. We weren't there emotionally.
Yeah. And that was a tough scene. That was a tough scene to do.
Yeah. I think if anybody that does listen to this will think about things in your life that have affected you and put you into a shell. I've literally gone to therapy for this because I thought there's nothing better than therapy whenever you're going through all these,
Sure.
emotions. But I think what it does for you is she taught me that to think of myself when I'm having fearful thoughts as a child, which is easier to do now that I have children, right? I look at my kids and you want everything for them. I don't mean that I'm fearful that, I don't want to hand them things or that I want them to have the greatest life in the world. I want them to be happy and chase their dreams. That's really what I want, right? But for all of us to go out there and just think about why are we holding ourselves back, it's always fear. And it's always every decision you make is either fear or love. Either you are afraid of something or you love something, right?
Sure.
And I think that fear is the driving force. And it was so bizarre to me, and I'm so ready to go because in the same year, last year that we have COVID, my mom passes away, who was kind of the critical voice in my head, who was the fearful one in our house because she was going through this terrible thing with my father and not understanding there's nothing to define it for her, right? And so she's like, get out of Willard and go do things and get away from here and go make money and whatever the case may be. But that same year, I'm making the movie about my childhood. My mom passes away, and it was like this release of like, if not now, when, right? I mean, you doing this podcast, the reason I was so excited for you to do it, it doesn't matter how many listeners you have right now. The point is just to do it. The point is to get your voice out there, and hopefully people will respond to it, and you'll find your audience. And then
it is literally something I've wanted to do for a long time, but because of, and I'll take it one step further than you because I look at it just a touch different.
Okay.
You look at fear, and I look at pain.
Okay.
And I think they're about the same. They're the same probably part in the brain.
I would
imagine.
Yeah, I bet so.
My wife and I have talked about this too. Is that fear and that pain are the same place, but also there's that like euphoric excitement.
Yes.
That fits in with all of those things. And that's what I've been trying to work in, is trying to switch my fear of pain to, it's like, getting up on stage for the first time and failing at it. It's the idea that people are going to laugh at you or whatever, but that pain that is involved, but that's why I think it's so important to realize is that, and we know this from the military, is that there's going to be pain either way. It doesn't matter. You're not getting rid of the pain.
That's the thing you have to get through. If you accept that,
right?
You're way ahead of the game all of a sudden.
Just know that there's always going to be some form of pain from some direction. You just want to mitigate how much it is. Yeah,
my wife always calls it, she's like, always tells our kids that with everything you do, there's always I'll call it a crap sandwich. I know what she says, but you have to decide, is that a sandwich you're willing to eat for this particular journey, right?
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, yes, I do agree with what you're saying, but I look at it like, this is a perfect example. This is so funny this is happening, but when I was young, I remember coming to my mom and saying I wanted to be an actor and I wanted to be on the radio. And my mom said, "Oh, honey, your voice is awful. You have the worst voice." And so I think you should look at things that are more something you can do. I mean, who tells their kid that, right? My mom was a little bit, I don't know. My mom was something else, but
yeah, my parents were the same way too, though. I mean, like, they
get afraid. Like they're like, "Oh, you'll fail at that."
Yeah, they don't want you to fail. And like when I started doing theater, I got out of the Navy, and within 2 weeks, I auditioned for a show.
Do you think that the Navy gave you the confidence to do that? What?
Oh yeah. I think it was. Well, what's the worst that could happen?
not having a bomb blow up on a boat.
Right. Yeah,
Right,
what was
so-
the worst that could happen?
Right.
I'd seen the worst that had happened.
Sure.
You know?
Right.
and
Different
so-
perspective.
Yeah. And so then you get up on stage, you're like, well, this is easy.
Sure.
You know?
Well,
This is super easy compared to that. And I can release all my frustration out in that scene if I want to.
Sure.
Now, acting for me early on was therapy. Now, since I have realized that's not the way to do that.
Sure.
Because that's why you see a lot of actors out there that are just
Losing their minds.
flipping crazy is because they use acting as a therapy session. No, go see a therapist. It's better.
Absolutely.
But I think that, you know, for me, it was a big therapy for me. It was an outlet for me to get,
Right.
you know, but going back, all of those things led me to this place. If I never would have gone into the military, I never probably would have gotten in.
Well, that's what,
You know, and so you look at a lot of that stuff, and I know this is getting fairly deep, but you know, you look at not going into the sales portion of things and going and making a ton of money, you never would have realized,
sure.
and you never would have made it to this point.
Yeah.
And it's so weird. I guess regret is the worst thing to have.
Yeah.
Is because it a healthy dose of it will fuel you, but too much of it will stop you.
Well,
in a
also,
way.
I would say that it's not real because here's the reality. I can say all day that I regret not going to LA and working for Jason Clark.
Right.
Right. But I don't, like today, I know I would do really well for him, but also I have all these other experiences.
Sure.
Like you just said, right? So I can regret it all day long. There's no way of knowing what would have happened. There's no way of knowing if I would have been successful. The only thing I regret is I wish I had the chutzpah at the time or the confidence to do what I wanted to do. Right. But then I could argue, but my wife and I wanted to have kids, so maybe I did do what I wanted to do.
But, you know, it's like I've had healthy doses of regret in my life. And like this was about, 5 years ago, my wife came to me and she was like, hey, I got an opportunity to move to Dallas, Texas and take this job. Should we do it? And everything told us no.
Why?
The universe told us no.
You just felt it?
Our kids were little. Our family was there. We were making good money. I had just started a business. There's no real reason to go, you know? And plus it was Texas, you know? And I was like,
So true.
I don't know. And so, but because I'd had those healthy doses of regret in my life, I was like, why not? Let's do it.
You did it?
And so we did.
Oh, I didn't know that.
We moved to Dallas, Texas, and then we were there for about a year, and things weren't going well.
Sure.
I was on the road every single day.
Right.
She was working every single day. We did not see our kids hardly at all. We were like two passing ships in the night, you know?
Yeah, that's hard.
We would be we'd talk on the phone for 2 hours a day, you know, but we just didn't see each other. And finally, I told her, I said, when we get to the 1 year mark, I said, you need to let me know. Because if we're going to get out of here, it's going to take us a year to get out of here.
Right.
And it was almost a year to the day. She goes, we're out of here. And I said, okay, we're going to start the wheels moving. She goes, where are we going to go to? I said, Springfield. Because I'd always wanted to move down here.
Okay.
And I said, we're moving to Springfield. And she's like, oh. But I
Right.
knew my negotiating chip was there because we'd moved to Dallas.
Right.
So now I got to move where I wanted to go.
Sure.
And so,
Yeah.
but that regret that we had got us to that point, and then it got us to here.
Yeah. I think as long as you're willing to maneuver, I mean,
And we didn't have a schedule either. So it kind of goes with what you're saying is that infinite way of looking at things. Going,
Yes.
we don't really have a plan, but we have opportunities, and we can jump at them.
the guy I was listening to on the podcast, Simon Sinek, when he was talking about, sorry about that. When I was listening to him talk about the infinite mindset, he had this great story that he had heard of how we really need to be thinking about life. And that is, it was an analogy about a young kid, a dad who had a child who was the best basketball player in this town. And everyone's like, you're so lucky because he's going to go to get scholarships, go to college. And his answer was, well, maybe we'll see. That was the answer. We'll see. Then he breaks his leg and he loses the scholarship. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing that could ever happen to you. And he says, we'll see. And then a war happens, but because he's broken his leg, he can't go to war. Everyone's like, oh my God, you're so lucky. You're so lucky. And he's like, we'll see. And so the point of that is that every time that something happens, everyone wants to try to say, oh, it's for a reason. Well, maybe it was. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm just saying that there's no closed doors, right? I mean, at the end of the day.
Well, we have a tendency to compartmentalize things
Yes.
and put them in a box.
Yes.
And, it's funny that you say that too, because like when we were doing Sato, we had this preconceived notion of what we were going to do.
Right.
We had a concept.
Yeah.
And then we got there, and I remember I walked outside. I said, guys, let's get out of the box on this.
Right.
Let's think of something different.
And you have to do that, I think.
And then we came up with what we came up with. Maybe we should have stayed with the other one.
I mean, you literally never know. But I always think about this because everyone's like, were you ever embarrassed that you failed so bad at that first film you did? Well, I was for a while. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm watching it on the screen. I'm like, this is the worst. I mean, this is horrible. But that led me then to meet another guy who I did a film festival with. And that was an awful failure. But no one called
What
me.
film festival was that?
We called it the Kindred, was the name of our company we're doing, the Kindred International Film Festival. I'm not even sure it was international, but let me just tell you how dumb I was. I mean, it was international because we had
international submissions.
Yeah. But I didn't even watch the ones that I put in to win awards to try to see what the judges could pick from. I just picked ones from different countries and said, good luck. And the judges came here like 4 of these are the worst things you've ever seen. Because I had so much, I wasn't expecting over 100. We had over 100 films, Tom. I didn't have the crew to handle that.
How did you publicize that back then?
Literally, the internet had just kind of really been taken off. And we put it out there. And I'm not kidding you, within a month, I had over 100 or 200 bands send us things. I had over 150 submissions. I had no way to look at them. I'd created a date. There's no way I could hit this date. I got all the theaters in town to let us show our films there. And then we even had, oh my gosh, what was the film? The guy who made The Crow, I can't think of his name right now, had a new film out. It wasn't very good. But they sent it to us, and we got to do the release of this film for the first time we ever showed it. And I didn't know what the rules were, so I put it into competition.
Oh my gosh.
And the production company called me and was like, don't you ever put things into play without talking to us first. I was like, oh, I can't do that on my own film festival. Oh, no, you cannot. There's all kinds of rules you have to follow. But my point of that is what it gave me was I got the university to help me out and give me all these different people. I mean, all these kids that came on board and started helping me. But I got, 20-year-old kids looking at these films, and then they're going to decide what should be up for, best film. I mean, no way. Bad idea. But
Alex Proyas.
Yes, Alex Proyas. And so he did a movie, I think it was like second or third movie he did. It was not great, but we were the first place that got to show that movie.
Really?
Yeah. And so once I got that, people started coming on board because they were like, oh, you must know a lot of people. I got to be honest with you. I have no idea how they found us. I have no idea what made them choose us. We're a first-time film festival. But that led me to the movie Bottleneck. They didn't care if I made a good movie or what I was good at. All they knew was I had connections to the university, and I had about 100 students that had worked for me in some form or fashion. And so I had a bunch of free labor for them, basically. I literally just brought all these kids in that were PAs, and they were just there. And I went to the university and got them to get credit for that. And so my point of saying that is you don't know what door is going to open up if you just walk. You have to just keep walking with people, and then things open up, right? And so, and my point of saying that is, and then, Jason told me to go sell cars. I sell cars. Then I move, I don't know, before you know it, I'm making money and things are going well for me on that level. I just think that we have to be careful not to close our minds off to what we really love while we're going on a path. Like you said, for 10 years or whatever it was, you weren't really aware of what was happening. We were just moving, right?
Right.
I don't like the feeling of just moving and not being aware of what's happening to me.
Yeah. It's scary.
It's very scary.
That's scary because it kind of feels like you're driving down the road at 100 miles an hour and you just decide to chuck the steering wheel out and you go, well, we'll just see where this happens.
Right. It'll all work out.
Which is sometimes like working on a film set. Yeah.
It is, man. No, I've loved this new journey that John and I are on. I've never fought with somebody more than I fight with Jonna, and I love her at the same time. Like, it's just, we're like...
oh, well, her and I have the same relationship. We fight all the time, but that's...
I've never wanted... Yeah, she and I couldn't be more different in so many ways. Other than we almost always like the same things. We almost always come up with the same storylines. We have a lot of things that we have that we share.
That means something to you.
Yeah. But just the way she goes about things, the way I go about things are different. And so... This year has been a really amazing thing for her and I to kind of learn how to find that happy medium, a middle ground. And I think when you're in your 40s and you're doing it, you have to be willing to realize that we both have our own way.
Oh, yeah.
Neither of them are wrong. It's just a matter of how
it's kind of how they work together. Yeah.
Right. And so
what do you all have? I mean, obviously we have Land of Milk and Honey that's coming out. Do you have kind of a ballpark of when that's going to happen?
Yeah, no, everyone's asking me that who's on the film. We think it's with our sound, our for scoring with Colton Jackson, who he has been really unbelievable. I mean, his music has been just unbelievable. He just really understands rhythm. And I find him to be a fascinating person because sound people are, in my mind, just a little bit of a tip for you guys as I move forward making films, I will never not have a sound person involved.
They're underappreciated.
It's shocking to me because I'd rather watch a film with great sound and not be as well lit or as nicely to look at than I would watch a greatly shot film with not very good sound.
Well, I have on very good, like 3 films I know of right now for Sato are dinged for their sound.
Right.
Mine is. Yours is in probably spots.
Sure.
My son's is.
Yeah.
And it's the one thing that everybody worries about camera.
Yes.
Everybody worries about light.
Cool shots.
But they don't worry about the audio.
So I'll tell you what happened. We were doing some rehearsals before we shot. You may remember this because it was a scene where you go outside and you're looking around and the kids are running out back. And we were coming up with some moments in the film that could be very suspenseful, right? And so, one thing that John and I really are awesome together in is that she likes to do things with one word where I like to do them in 1,000 words. And so I overdo things all the time. And so I had 25 different places that was going to scare the audience or make the audience suspenseful. But it was Colton that was sitting there and was like, hey, he was hearing it in his head of when sound would be rising up and when it was coming down. And so I don't know why people don't bring sound in way earlier to help with the pre-production of the script when you're mapping it all out, because his perspective was invaluable. And as I've been working with him on the score and on the Foley, it's just the things that he's able to do that can take you into that world. I mean, just imagine this. We have a black screen in the beginning and he's got sound effects going on of nature. And you know right where you are immediately, right? I don't have to have a picture. And so I find it to be a fascinating concept. There's actually a show now coming out on Apple TV where there's only voices over the phone talking about an event that's happening by it's like 8 different episodes, and famous actors are all doing it, but it's like a 15 or 20 minute episode. And so it's all through sound, no video. And I find it to be a fascinating concept because of that. But to answer your question, he has it. I'm hoping that it's completed in the next 3 to 4 weeks. We have a few extra things to do on it. So our goal is in about 6 weeks to have that done. We will have our Indie for Real done. The Indie for Real concept is that we had a Carbon Trace here in town shoot the behind the scenes so we could create all these different videos of how we did it. Not that we're special, but as much as we really wanted to show the nitty gritty of the fights and the problems and the things that we really struggled with. So whenever you watch the film, maybe you can see that and go, oh, that's why that failed or why that was good.
And appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I really believe in showing failure. I don't think you shouldn't hide from it. And then we've got a class that we're doing on how to get a gig that we're going to be putting online from Jonna's perspective of how you can actually go to LA and get a job right now as an actor without having a ton of experience. So those 3 things are in the works. And then we're also trying to, right now I'm trying to do our social media, trying to create a blog about kind of what we're going through.
Oh, cool.
I'm really trying to get that out there. And then we have another production of a thing called Fosters that we really want to do about, foster kids. I realize you can't call it Fosters now because there's already something called Fosters about foster kids.
Right.
I thought my title was really, really brilliant, but it's not. So I can't use that. That'll humble you real fast. So yeah, we're just trying to do one thing at a time.
You can call it the F-Osters.
That's what I'm going to do. The F-Osters. The F. Osters. That'll go over well. I don't know. I think it's an exciting time right now to be in film. I think there's so many streaming contents now that need, content, streaming services. And I don't know. I think there's a really good opportunity for all of us.
I think there is too. I think one of the biggest things that we have to kind of tackle is figuring out that distribution side of things, because it's kind of like audio in the production, in the whole production scheme of it. Is we see a lot of people that go around and say, hey, I'm going to do this film. Yeah. Who's going to see it?
So,
and where do you see it?
Yeah, that was kind of part of my business plan, and kind of what my spark was for all of this is that I had decided that if I was going to make a short film, it's a 35-minute film, and I actually think it's pretty good considering how many mistakes were made on it that we've learned since then.
Did I make any?
You made the most, Tom.
Oh, great.
The whole point of Indie for Real is to teach people, from at least on my section as a producer on it, of where you can save money and time. I've learned so much about just some dumb things that you can do to really make sure that time and money won't be the problem, right?
Right.
But when I went and got investors for it, my concept was that Indie for Real and the Land of Milk and Honey can be sold as a one package item just online, that people can buy it and they can learn and watch. If it was good enough for us to be able to actually get it sold to somebody for some other reason, then great. But I wanted to have a backup plan, and my business mind of it works in that way, because my feeling is if I can make the investors money, right, and give another platform for them to make money that we don't really talk about very much in the film industry, they'd be more apt to come on. And so I do think that we've got a shot there to do that. I'm interested in how this is all going to play out. But I'm not nervous about it. Not that I think it's going to be great. It's just that I feel like it's all positive. I mean, we completed it. We're going to get it out there. We're going to give it our shot. We'll all learn from it. If you and the kids can get some relevance from it by putting your guys out there a little bit more, that's awesome. If we can get a job from it, that's great.
Yeah.
But I really, really believe that the point is to get it out there and do the best you can. And I think that people love stories. They don't necessarily always have to have everything be perfect on film, but it's got to be a good story, right? And I do think it's a good story.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. I think it's a good story, and it needs to be shown.
Yeah.
And that's super duper duper important, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
Well, I want to wrap up a little bit here.
Why? It's a 4-hour podcast. You can't go on forever.
I know. I'm trying to keep them.
Are we that exciting that people are going to listen to us all day?
I know. Yeah. I have people that like call me up and they go, I'm on the first 30 minutes of the podcast. I'm gonna have to listen to the next part, later on. I'm like, all right, fine.
Sorry.
That's cool. That's cool. So that's cool. I'm glad that you guys have stuff on the horizon, because that's exciting. And that, honestly, for more work around here for people to be able to do. And you guys are definitely, like when we did this production, we had Grip 417 and Sam Holder, and we had pretty much all local talent working on it.
Yeah, we had everybody.
And that was awesome. And it kind of adds into that whole idea of just building those film communities and making great stuff.
I'm actually very impressed with what's around here. We just got to get it to where there's so much commercial work, and guys, they all want to make films, but they got to do commercial work to make, to pay the bills.
Pay the bills.
If we can find ways for all of us to come together on weekends, on other times, and be able to shoot some things, there's a way. I call it the magic formula, but everything's got a formula that you can put together to create success in my mind. And so it's about, can you actually do it and put your egos aside and put as many people together as possible? That's hard. It's just a hard thing to do. But if you can do it, I had a blast on making the movie, and I really believe in my heart that everybody was involved with it, from the kids, from you to Colton to Sam, all at different times had an idea to make it better. And that to me is a really fun collaborative moment.
And that's just naming a few. There was a lot of people on that production that everybody was kind of working on all cylinders to make a great film.
You know who people never, just real quick before we leave, there are two areas that everyone needs to always be aware of in my mind, because Jamie, who I think you had on your show one time, right? when Jonna was directing it, the one mistake that Jonna made, if I'm putting, we all made mistakes, right? But the one thing that I could put into a bubble, is that it was a much bigger production that she had done before. And there were a lot of names and voices of people just coming at her. It's a lot of energy all of a sudden, right? And so she would once in a while almost be shutting down. And the one person that she really could not shut down for, in my mind, would have been Jamie.
Right.
But Jamie could not get through to her at times because Jonna's focusing on the shot. And Jamie's like, that's not, his hand wasn't there.
Continuity's wrong.
The continuity's off, right? And one point I had to pull Jonna to the side and say, listen, you're ignoring Jamie. And she's like, I am? She had no idea she was even ignoring her. But she was kind of just blowing her off. That, and then the organization of how you put your film together.
DIT.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
In fact, I thought this is a waste of money
It
until I
is.
saw what he did.
It is one of the most important things. Actually, Jamie and Howie,
Yeah.
they brought order to the chaos.
You have to, because I don't want to sit around and figure out how they're going to number these things and name them. But I'm telling you, even working on Sato, we were shooting them. And when I went to go try to figure out which clip was what, I was like, oh my God, where's Howie?
And that was a 5-minute piece. Right?
A 5-minute,
Yeah.
exactly. We had 7 days of shooting.
So what Sato teaches you, in my opinion, and I've said it a million times, I've said it to Jamie, is that she is, in her system, is the most important thing on the film set.
Yeah, and I feel bad because I did not give that enough time. She and I talked a little bit, but I kind of blew it off, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And then when we're editing the movie, the reason that the movie's about 6 weeks behind is because we didn't listen to Jamie.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there, we're watching continuity, and I'm just like, I remember her saying that. That's right. She did say, oh, yep, it's hard. You have young amateur actors.
I did hear that I switched my hand quite a few times in a scene.
You did, but what was funny, I know Jonna called you and told you that, didn't she? It's because that day we're editing, she's literally freaking out. She's like, why can't Tom just keep his one hand on the glass? I'm like, I don't know. We weren't listening to Jamie probably. That's probably why we were doing it. The stress of making it makes people inapproachable sometimes. And when you're the director, you have to be approachable. And she just wasn't at different times. So she was like so focused on things. And the amateur actors are tougher when you're a director because she has to stay on top of them, right? But man, I was like, Jamie's like, I'm gonna do it this way, and we're gonna set up this. I'm just like, whatever you want to do, Jamie. Then after she's gone, I'm like, wait a minute, what is this system she set up? I mean,
what did you say?
It looks really organized.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're doing, right?
She has a really good little system.
Oh,
She
I
does.
bet.
She has a really good system.
Yeah.
So if you are working on a film and
Jamie.
you think that you have got a ton of shots, or if you don't, give Jamie Talamantes a call.
Oh man, she'll help you.
Her name will be in the description. You can give her a
Absolutely.
call because she is a rock star on it.
Absolutely. So,
Well, man,
how you want to wrap it up, man? You just want to talk about how awesome life is. You want to talk about what else we want to go over? I'm just kidding.
well, I just want to say thank you so very much
Thanks for having me, man.
agreeing to let me crash your house
No problem.
and do the show here. In parting, I do want to say that I am extremely, extremely privileged and honored to have worked on your film.
I appreciate that.
That meant a lot to me. It was one of those things that I said during the pandemic that I remember standing out on your front sidewalk out there, and I was looking back at the house, and there was everybody running back and forth because it was a full-blown production. And I remember looking there and going, I don't have to move a camera today.
Right.
All I got to do is act. And that sounds like a lot of fun. And I never would have thought that I would have been in that situation.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome.
I think it also helps whenever you have a subject matter that people seem to care about. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone was really behind the concept.
Right.
And so I think people were really protecting you too because they were watching you go through this emotional roller coaster. I mean, I'm telling you, bud, you could not have been more of what my father was like and what vets that go through post-traumatic stress or you couldn't have been more on it. And so you scared the crap out of me and brought me back to my childhood. I mean, it was an amazing, amazing time, but it was really nice to watch you be able to be out there and kind of gather your thoughts and go through your dark spaces that you were going
Yeah.
through.
Don't stay there too long.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
watch all the crew just kind of protect you and back
Yeah,
you
they
up.
did. They all were kind of like, are you are you okay?
Everyone's like, where's Tom? And everybody's like, don't bother him. And I'm like, he's out front by himself talking to himself. I mean, people are like, we have to get Tom Bray to shoot. Who wants to ask Tom to come in? We're like, Jonna, go get him.
Yeah, Jonna was, I think I kind of told her, I gave her that she was my safe person that could come up and say, hey, it's time to go do that. And it wasn't for any other reason, was I just don't want to be
mean.
Well, because, I'm not a huge method actor, but when you're on set, you probably need to stay in that headspace a little bit.
Especially in that kind of character.
Yeah, and I was afraid that if I had somebody that wasn't prepared enough that I could potentially snap. And I wasn't, and I think the only person I really ever snapped at was Jonna.
My favorite part of the whole movie, just for everybody listening to real quick, is that we're out front. You're going through this amazingly dark, hard scene with hardly any words, just emotions. And we need you to say one line. And we're sitting behind the camera. I'll never forget it. I'm behind the camera with Jonna. Everyone is completely affected by your performance. And you sneak over. She sneaks over there and just whispers to you. I know she told you to tell the line, but you just go, I'm trying. And you just screamed it out. And everyone's like, oh crap. Oh my God. And then she runs back, not even affected because she's an actor.
Right.
And she just go, you okay? She goes, oh yeah, I'll be fine. And I'm like, okay. I just wet myself, but it's okay.
I warned her a couple, and I mean, we kind of had a dialogue beforehand, and I really didn't want to scare the kids because
I bet
I knew that
they've never gone through anything
they
like
hadn't
this.
probably dealt with that stuff, and I didn't want to build a bad relationship with them, but I also didn't want to necessarily build too much of a relationship with them. And yeah,
they loved it, man. They talk about it all the time. They're always they think you're should win an Oscar for it. They're all like, oh man. Like in the interviews for the behind the scenes,
right?
All the kids, all four of them were like, Tom, man, he was so good to work with, and he would bring me back in, and I'd be like, I couldn't figure out where I was, and Tom would start talking, and we're like, oh my God. And I was like, oh yeah, Tom brought you right back to it.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, me neither.
Well, Brian, brother, it's been awesome having you on here. Keep me posted of all the new things that are coming. And once we get the film out, I kind of want to do a viewing, and then where we can talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it'd be kind of fun.
No, I want to do a thing where you and the kids get to go on, maybe on stage a little bit and just have some people ask you some questions about the filming of it, just to give them some practice with them. And I think you being up there would help them do that.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a really fun thing to do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, brother, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You have been listening to the Bravo Creative Podcast. Analysis of your biometrics have been compiled and calculated. You are now a minuscule part of the collective. Enjoy the rest of your pitiful day.